He will set us free.
With the third chapter concluded in Bendy and the Ink Machine, we are left with more questions than ever. Is Bendy actually Joey Drew? Is Henry actually a good character? What about the Tommy gun and the projectionist? While I covered the majority of these concepts in my last video, there's been one aspect that I've been thinking a lot about since I finished it, and that is the actual world of Bendy. While there are so many plot points and character modes we want to figure out, everything up until this point has been showing us more and more of what this world is like. And although we spent our time in a dark, dreary studio, there are subtle hints scattered around that may be clues to truly understanding the Bendy and the Ink Machine universe. Let's start off by talking about the studio itself. Now, this building has certainly evolved with every iteration of the game that has been released. However, what we are led to believe in the first few chapters is certainly blown out of scope in the third. This studio is way bigger than we ever imagined, especially given the number of employees we know about so far. While the staff was certainly overworked, I never got the impression that this particular studio had a lot of operating power in terms of how many employees were on payroll. You would think that for a studio that is possibly struggling financially, that they wouldn't be able to afford such a large building. On top of that, a building of this size does not make sense at all for what is actually accomplished within it. A multitude of large rooms in the facility should be able to hold multiple desks, where a team of animators could tirelessly work. However, what we have so far is a building that is well beyond 10 floors tall, with a lot of wasted space. There aren't any windows at all either, which I find a tad strange. I suppose distractions can be minimized without them, and the hours can melt away when you can't tell the time of day by the sun. For a boss as strict as Joey, this does make sense. However, I think the building lacks windows for another reason. Everything in Bendy and the Ink Machine is hand-drawn in nature. Stylistically, this is a pretty awesome concept. However, the more and more I see this occur with everyday objects, the odder it becomes. This became most apparent with the wide variety of weapons within the third chapter. Not only was the environment drawn, but everything within it was drawn. People may argue that this is just a stylized choice that the developers made. But what if that wasn't the only case? What if the world looked this way because that's what the world was? A world where you aren't just playing as an animator returning to his place of employment, which has become corrupted, but rather you live in the world of cartoons yourself. You are a cartoon who drew cartoons for a living. If that's sounding pretty Inception-like with the whole dream within a dream thing, that's because it is. It would explain why such a twisted and demented building could exist without any questions being asked. It can be as tall and short as it wants to be. The weapons and items you find inside look paper-like and drawn because they were drawn into existence themselves. They take a back seat to the horror and happenings taking place within the Inky studio. But perhaps that is just because they are a part of the accepted reality. However, if the cartoon within a cartoon stance is correct, then the purpose of the Ink Machine is more dire than it seems. Hypothetically, if the Bendy cartoon was drawn by the cartoon cast of Bendy and the Ink Machine themselves, then if the outer artist ceases production, the world of Bendy and the Ink Machine dies as well. Life ends because the next frames simply don't exist. You have the people who create Bendy and the Ink Machine's worlds and characters, and those created characters are the ones who drew the Bendy cartoon you see in the game. The Ink Machine makes a whole lot more sense from this perspective, because otherwise it honestly isn't helping the animation process at all. However, if it is being used to create various characters in-game, then that is possibly equivalent to drawing additional frames for other characters. Perhaps this is why we encounter so many deceased Borises in Chapter 3. The Ink Machine wasn't designed to increase animation output for the actual cartoons we experience in the game. It was designed within this world to sustain life of the current cartoon characters. If you could stay alive and animate beyond your original artist's intentions, then you could for sure cheat death once they stop drawing. This may also explain why things appear so demonic, similarly to old cartoons where it was abundant. If you're actually in the cartoon world, these demons would be reality. Of course, this stance also creates a paradox as well though. Truthfully, if this was 100% the case, then Henry would have never returned to the studio since he couldn't have done so without it being the original artist's intentions. If Henry is operating in a pre-planned timeline according to his own cartoon, his free will will be limited. However, my stance on the Ink Machine may not be completely correct, but certain aspects of it may still be true. It could still be a world of cartoons that just exist and have their own free will. It's very apparent that the ink flowing through the building serves no actual purpose for the true animation process. Perhaps this may be explained in further chapters, but currently it serves as more of an aesthetic. Unless the way it speeds up animation is by making more bodies to animate, then it is a tad off its mark. This would be different than creating the frames of animation I mentioned earlier, as creating working bodies out of ink would surely allow you to execute animations more swiftly, just by having a larger staff that didn't need to sleep. However, I can't imagine they'd be too accurate, as they make a mess out of everything they touched. With this in mind, it really makes me wonder about the entirety of this cartoon world. What does the actual outside world look like? How are the cityscapes, landscapes, and the overall environment? Is it simply just a siloed world that exists in the studio and nothing more? So many questions arise even from an existential perspective. If Bendy and the Ink Machine is truly based on cartoons that draw other cartoons, it makes me want to know more about this twisted world outside this odd studio. It truly makes you wonder. But now that I've dumped on all of you, I'd of course love to hear your thoughts. Do you think the characters we encounter in Bendy exist because they are part of a drawn cartoon themselves? What do you think the Ink Machine's true purpose is? To automate the actual production process, to add more life to existing cartoon life forms, or to mass produce an army of ink people who can then automate the animation process through sheer manpower? Perhaps Murray Hill is the Acme Corporation of the Bendy world. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And with that, I hope you enjoyed this holistic view of an inky world. Perhaps some of these other videos will tickle your fancy. I have a video specifically about Chapter 3 as well. Thanks for watching, guys and gals, and until my next video, cheers.